And for more on the fallout from this case and the interview, I want to bring in ABC News contributor Elsie Granderson and the founder of the Black Police Experience, Sonia Pruitt. Good morning to you both. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
I'd like to start with a question to both of you. And Sonia, you can answer first. But did you hear anything from this interview that changes your thoughts on this case at all?
I heard nothing that changed my mind. I had already watched that video several times. And, you know, first of all, I'm feeling some empathy for Mr. Blake because he was put in a really difficult situation. And let me tell you why. There were options for the police officers outside of shooting. There were several officers on the scene. They should have been able to arrest one man, and they had an opportunity to do so without shooting. Shooting should be a last resort. There was an option to disengage. I never saw Mr. Blake pull his knife and lunge towards the officer or even move towards the officer. He tried to get into the car. So I am still feeling very uncomfortable with the officer's version of things, but here's something else to consider. Officers often cite an adrenaline rush. It causes tunnel vision, a loss of hearing. There's a fight or flight trigger that happens during these encounters. So why would it not follow that the person that they're attempting to arrest might not have these same physical manifestations in a stressful situation, making it difficult to follow orders?
Elsie?
I agree with everything that was just said. There appeared to me, and obviously I'm not a trained police officer, but it just seemed as if there were other options before shooting a man multiple times in the back in order to make an arrest. When I listened to his description of his encounter with the police officers, it rang true to me based upon my own personal experience. I, as a young man, had a gun drawn on me by a plainclothes police officer growing up in Detroit. I had no idea he was a police officer until the gun was out, pointed towards me, and by the grace of God, I am here today. So while I was listening to his account, I recognized that there may be some contrarians who roll their eyes and say, you should have just complied, you should have done this, you should have done that. First of all, you weren't there. Second of all, we don't know the full backstory, but most importantly, I didn't see anything in that video that looked as if it required lethal force to be used against Jacob Blake. And I recognize Kenosha Police Department said that the officers follow their procedures. I don't know the procedures, but there seemed to be something dastardly wrong if part of the procedure is shooting a man multiple times in the back.
And Sonia, the DA says the day that he was shot, the mother of Blake's children called 911 saying he was going to take off in her rental car with the kids. Police were also told he has a warrant on domestic violence offenses and sexual assault, and he had a knife. You are a former police chief. How should all of that play into the way officers respond to a case like this?
You know, we want to take into consideration all of the facts, but for me, none of that amounts to, well, let's make sure that, you know, this guy gets 7 bullets in the back, okay? Because of this, generally, officers are not trained to ensure that everyone goes home. Our training, well, when I was a police officer, was about the officer going home. There's not a holistic view of everyone's safety. And at the end of the day, when you leave these encounters, the officer wants to go home to their loved ones, and so does the suspect, because suspects have loved ones, right? We're trained that it's better to be judged by 12 than carried by 6. That, for me, is ridiculous, and we need to change that mindset, change that type of training. We need to make it clear and very important that everyone is important, no matter what their background.
And Elsie, the fact that Blake survived this shooting and is now able to speak about it from a first-person perspective is a rarity. How do you think that could impact the fight for racial equality and justice in policing and the kind of changes that Sonia's talking about in general?
Well, I think first and foremost, having someone able to share that side of the story is very important in this situation, because oftentimes if you're an Ahmaud Arbery, if you are George Floyd, if you are a Breonna Taylor, you don't have that opportunity to share what you experienced during this encounter. But there are other procedural things that the Kenosha Police Department needs to look at, as well as law enforcement in general should consider. For example, body cameras were approved by the city years ago. but they balked at doing it because of the price of doing so. Well, now they're facing something I would say is much more costly than just buying body cameras. Not only are you talking about the damage that was caused by some of the rioters who was taking advantage of the situation, but you're facing civil suits. But more importantly, you're facing credibility issues within your community. You have an entire swath of people that you must be in part of, serving, who do not trust you. That is nothing you can put a price tag on. So body cameras, I believe, is a good step. It isn't the cure-all, but it certainly is a good step. And there's one other thing for those who may be rolling their eyes wondering, well, why didn't he just comply? The officer had no choice. Last week, we saw a domestic terrorist attack at the Capitol. We had members of Congress running for their lives. We saw insurgents try to stop a constitutional procedure. We know what happened during that day. And we all know if those individuals who flooded the Capitol were of color, things would have ended it a lot more differently. So all I'm saying is, I'm not concerned about whether or not Jacob Blake is a good person or not. I'm concerned about whether or not law enforcement views him as a person, the same way they would view a white person. That's what I'm asking.
And Sonia, I want to go back to the body cam point that LZ is making. How much does that make a difference in a case like this? Because again, while Jacob Blake can now tell his story, most victims like this usually cannot. So how much does it impact things when you can see for yourself what happened, or at least part of what happened? And this debate, for example, Jacob Blake is saying the officer did not identify himself, that he didn't make clear that he had a warrant and he was putting him under arrest. He just knew that someone grabbed his arm. How much of a difference does that make in a case like this? And for the public trust in general, I should add.
Oh, yeah, it makes a whole lot of difference. Since the inception of body-worn cameras, we have been able to see what before and historically we were not able to see. We were able to see the disparities in what the officer might have said in a police report and what actually happened. We see that here. We never, at least in our camera view, see Jacob Blake pull his knife and actually push his knife towards the police officer. That is a red flag. Now, again, everybody's memory may be a little foggy during an encounter like this, but why is it that the officer gets the benefit of the doubt and the suspect, in this case, Mr. Blake, does not? He should. He's another human being. People should listen to what he has to say, too. Instead, we get to hear about his criminal past, his criminal history. He had a warrant. At the end of the day, those things are not really important in this moment. We're talking about this incident, and that is the type of thing that erodes the public trust. But again, ever since the advent of body-worn cameras and camera phones, we're able to have a clearer view of what is happening. And, we have to just, I hear our other guests talk about what happened at the Capitol. Imagine if there were no cameras. We needed to be able to see these disparities. We need to be able to see the things that just don't mesh for us as a Black community. And everyone else should be able to see it too. So cameras are really important.
It is eye-opening, and many of us don't like what we see, but at least it helps us to be able to move forward and hopefully address some of these issues that we were blind to for so long. LZ, one of the hardest parts about the Blake case is the kids. So what do you think about when you think about his kids, what they witnessed and what kind of an impact that has, not only on them personally, but also what happens the next time they are approached by a police officer?
I can only assume they'll be scared for their lives based upon what they witnessed. And it's a shame that we don't consider the impact from a mental health perspective, not just on children, but just on everyone when they are traumatized by something like this. I'm pretty sure the people who called the police officers did not call the police so that they could try to shoot and kill Jacob Blake. They were just trying to resolve a domestic dispute. So that person is probably feeling a certain amount of guilt and mental anguish. And the poor children are stuck in the same cycle that I was on when I was exposed to things like this, to many people in this country who are trying to navigate. To this day, when an officer pulls behind me when I'm on the highway, there is an involuntary bodily response. My palms get sweaty, my body gets tense, and there's very little I can do to stop it. And I've been to a therapist about it. So I can only imagine what these poor children are trying to navigate and deal with, as well as everyone else who bared witness to what transpired.
It's something this whole country is going to have to reckon with. ABC News contributor LZ Granderson and former Montgomery County Police Captain Sonia Pruitt. Thank you both.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.